Hello, Year 9. So this is my big YouTube debut, test of trying to see what this looks like, filming my screen and my face at the same time. So yeah, I've been thinking about you guys and wondering how you're all going. Are you bored at home? Are you really enjoying it? Are you stressed because there's all this online stuff going on? Yeah, let me know. I'd be curious to see how you're managing during these wild and unknown times. So what I'm going to take you through is your assessment, which if you're confident in this, you may not need this, and don't let me confuse you because I want you to take it down whatever path you're particularly interested in, because it's a bit more of a research essay given that we don't have class and you have the internet. So, but the big question is, did World War I significantly impact Australia? So you can either argue that it did or it didn't. And then here's some vocabulary that you can use, but you don't have to. That's from last year. I forgot to change it. Egypt was in there, which Safia pointed out, which definitely don't talk about Egypt. So here's the marking key. So introduction provides the overview of what you're going to talk about, basically. Try and put in some key terms to the question. So try and use the word significant and impact, and give a clear sense of the proposition and the direction of your essay. So yeah, that's your thesis statement. And then understanding the narrative. So it demonstrates an understanding of the interrelationship between the events, the people and ideas, and the continuity and change. So that kind of shows me that you understand how everything's connected, because sometimes we'll just throw these random ideas, but the real beauty, how you get more marks, is if you can relate them to each other and show me, oh, okay, the fact that that happened also had an impact on this. It's like all those linking things. Written composition and argument. So you develop a sustained and sophisticated argument, which shows a depth of analysis throughout the essay, which is analytical, logical, and coherent. So that's like having a good mix between your head and your heart. Excellent written composition. So giving me some good evidence and some facts, but really like persuading me with your emotional, persuasive language skills as well. And then conclusion draws the essay's argument or point together at the end. So we've got this here, the question, and then here's an example of a one-sentence thesis statement of what I would write about, or like that I've just pulled together. World War I significantly impacted Australia through women and children entering the workforce to fill the positions of men. A whole generation of young Australian men dying of being, that doesn't make sense. A whole generation of young Australian men dying of being mentally impacted by war. Oh, I think it's supposed to be and being mentally impacted by war. Australia's economy having to adapt, and Australia's alliance with Britain tested as the conscription debate in Australia divided the country. So they're kind of the key things that I decided would be interesting to write about for me personally, or from like what I researched. Because then I've just kept in here what I was going to write about if I read about it. So the fact that women and children in the workplace were filling the jobs of men after the war. They didn't necessarily want to go back to the homemaker roles, and that's kind of why it significantly impacted Australia. So they went into the workforce, and then after they came back, because remember we heard about the suffragettes movement and women were starting to get the vote, and then now they're starting to get to go into all these jobs that they weren't allowed to go into before. And so then the men came back and they were like, actually, we kind of like this. I think we want to stay in some of these roles. So do a bit more research into that if that's what you're interested in writing about. Economic changes. So the fact that over 200,000 Australian men went to war all up, 60,000 of them died, and then others came back with post-traumatic stress. And then this impacted their ability to be part of the economy, to be in loving relationships and to function on a daily level. So you could do a little bit more research into that as well. International trade stopped because of war, but then the positive is that new industries emerged in Australia, like manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. And then political changes. So after the news of Gallipoli, Australian men no longer felt the same romance about going to war. The Prime Minister tried to bring in conscription so that Australia could support Europe, well, like Britain, but it really divided the country because conscription is where you force people to go to war. So any men between these ages would have to go and fight a war. But then, yeah, half of Australia thought that was a good idea and that we should like support Britain, and the other half is like, we're so far away, like let them fight their war. And so that kind of put a little bit of tension politically on the country. But then overall, Australia's relationship with Britain was still really strong. Um, Australia decided to separate a little bit more and become a little bit more independent. So there would be some political changes, but also there's lots of different impacts, and so they're just a few. So write whatever you want to write about, you know. So then this is just to help you. Again, you don't have to use this structure, but give me an introduction. So then for me, one way I would do the women in the workforce, women and children in the workforce, and then I would do, what did I say? Oh yeah, losing all the men and the so that losing all the men and the economic and mental impacts of that. And then my third one, I would go into like maybe what's the third one that I would write about? Maybe like the conscription debate, this and relationship with Britain. Ugh. And then in this is like a really good persuasive technique. In paragraph 4, is to do the counter argument. And so you would say, so in this, I've said that Australia was significantly impacted. So the counter argument is that some people would say that like the war was mostly in Europe. So then I read this little part in the textbook that I thought was quite good. So it said, at the end of World War I, the map of Europe was redrawn. Once powerful empires were broken up and new nations were created in their place. The war also tested Australia's commitment to Great Britain. Although Australia displayed a strong sense of loyalty to Britain by committing troops and resources, the Australian public was divided over the issue of conscription. So more so the beginning of that is what I was interested in, the fact that a lot of the war did get fought in Europe, and then you can see in your little table that Britain sent like 5 million people to war, and Australia sent like 230,000 or something. And so it had a much more significant impact on Europe, and the fact that they broke up their countries afterwards and redrew their borders, like that's huge. But this doesn't minimize that Australia was also significantly impacted. That's what I would argue. So tell me a little bit more about what happened in Europe in that paragraph. But then in your conclusion, it's kind of like drawing all those things together. So World War One, the Great War, was huge for all countries involved. And then the ways that it significantly impacted Australia were these ways. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And then it's been really nice to see some of your drafts coming through. And then do some of your own research with the areas that you're more interested in. And then once you're all good to go, in here, assessment 2, essays, that's where you'll put your submission. And then I can give you feedback through this section here. So I'm not sure how that shows up for you because I'm still learning, but yeah, keen to see if how that comes through to you. But yeah, don't stress about, I said 1.5 pages to 3 pages, but that kind of really depends. Like I was more thinking writing, but when you've written it and then you type it up, sometimes it shortens it. So just you write the essay that you want to write and try and aim for at least like a page and a half. And then if you've got more time and you've got more stuff that you want to write about, right, send it to me. But yeah, this is more as we're going through this weird time. I don't want you to stress about this. I just want you to feel um, engaged in something that is maybe cool to learn about and part of our history. So yeah, miss you guys and send me some drafts.